Muziek maakt het leven leuker. En met Spotify Premium kun je elke dag, de hele dag, muziek luisteren. Geen advertenties, onbeperkt nummers overslaan, geen dataverbruik. Wil je elk nummer afspelen? Muziek en geniet.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Something different tonight. Not your regular gaming session. Though even those have gone more uncommon lately. Been busy with lots of stuff and haven't been streaming much lately, so I'm going to try and make up for that. And tonight, no video game, but I wanted to do something different for a change, and I'm gonna do a introductory session about game programming using the Unity engine. I'm not an experienced programmer, and I'm definitely not an experienced Unity programmer. So this session is mostly aimed towards beginners and people with an interest in programming. We'll mainly deal at first with the concept of my game in development. So chances are tonight we will not have any graphics or anything playable or interactive. It's just going to be the initial concept and thinking about the way to set up my game in Unity. And the game I'm intending to build over a series of streams, and this will be the first one, will be something in the vein of Mad TV. And I'm not sure if you guys know Mad TV. Mad TV is an old game, DOS-based game, where you play a character in charge of a TV channel in a two-dimensional building. There's 3 channels, the green, red and blue if I'm not mistaken. You control one of them, and the other 2 are controlled by the AI and Unity of Command. So yeah, you control the TV channel, you walk around the building, you get some programs from the agency, you get some ads, you broadcast stuff, the other channels also do so, and then you have at the bottom of the screen a TV where you can switch between the 3 channels, and an inverted TV where you can see the audience, where you can look through the TV and see the audience sitting in the couch and watching television. So that gives you some feedback about the people watching your program. And then of course it's a race against the other channels. On Amiga I think that's quite possible, Spite. Yeah. It's a very simple classic game. Been lots of clones and reinventions. Neither of them really getting to the original, what made the original great. And part of that was most definitely the humor. I've watched and I've seen that there's also now a online version of MadTV, MadTV Online, and it looks like more or less the original game in a browser. So definitely something to check out. I haven't tried it myself. But anyway, we're not here to play MadTV. What I'm going to do is develop some sort of MadTV myself. At first I will go with the original and try to rebuild something as similar as possible, and then later of course I'm gonna add my own twist to that and try to do some stuff differently while still retaining what kept the original great. Right, behind my camera here you can already see the Unity window. I haven't done anything yet. This is just the launch of Unity. I've selected a new 2D project and it's still completely empty. So let's look at first all the windows in Unity. If we start at the left here, we have the scene window, and the scene window is the way you look at your scene as a developer. You can rotate, you can move objects around in your scene while the game is not running. So this is basically a way to quickly build a game. Just drop some objects in the scene, give them some behavior, and there you go. Obviously we're not going to work like that. We're gonna do it something more conceptually and trying to segregate the game logic from the input and the graphics. Next to that we have the game window, and this is when you hit play, and I can do that right now. When you hit play, the game will run inside this window, and I'm actually running the game right now. Of course we don't see anything because the game is completely empty. We don't have anything running, but it works. We can let the game run, we can pause it, and we can stop it. And then we have at the bottom here, we have the console. When you compile, when you write some code and you compile it and you hit play, then the console will give you some feedback, any compiler errors. If you made some syntax errors in one of your scripts, you can get some feedback on the console. And then at the right here we have the hierarchy. The hierarchy at the top, we already have a scene here called Untitled, and in that scene we already have a camera, main camera. So the camera is the only object in our scene at the moment and has been added automatically. Then we have our project folder down here, which is completely empty as well. And then at the right we now have services, where you can have services from Unity, but we can also switch to the inspector, and then we get more details about our camera. For instance, the transform. Every game object in Unity has a transform, giving it a position, a rotation, and a scale. So at the moment we can see that the camera is at x0, y0, and z minus or z minus 10. And it's got a scale of 1 in every dimension. So we can play with that. We're not gonna do it, we're gonna keep the camera as is. But let's first start to think about the game that we're going to develop and how we are going to do it. One thing I do definitely want is to separate my game logic from the graphical implementation and the platform that will be used. So that means that anything user input related, the UI, will be separate from the game logic itself. So I intend to create first a game model with all the objects in the game and how they are logically working together to do what the game is supposed to do. That's the game logic layer. Then we have the data being the actual details of objects in the game, and those might be something like XML files with all the different movies in the game, for instance. So the data, there would be in the game model we would have like a movie class, very generic movie class, and then our data would be some files that we store with like an XML containing all the different movies that are in the game with their title and description, and possibly even in different languages. So localization, the game logic doesn't care about the language. The data may be separated by language, for instance. Then we will have the user interface, where the user interface elements on the screen will be part of, like buttons and stuff like that, and windows. And finally we will have the controllers, and the controllers like the input controller. There could be a separate one for touchscreens, for mouse and keyboard, for game controllers. We'll have a graphics controller responsible for the graphics on screen, and again we can have one for 2D, 3D, virtual reality, whatever. The idea is that by separating all that from the original game logic, it makes it easy to implement the same game on a different platform or in a different format, or implement different input mechanisms such as mouse and keyboard or touchscreens or whatever. So that's the idea. Now how we go about this is going to be a long process, of course, and I want to start with the concept straight away instead of just starting with creating some objects. First thing I'm gonna do to at least show you something in Unity is to create a simple UI. And what I'm gonna do here in the scene, I'm going to add a UI element, a canvas. Now canvas is just an, if we look at the inspector, it's pretty much a empty game object, but it's used to contain other UI elements. So it's like a transparent window over here where we can add other UI elements. Now inside the canvas I'm going to create another one. Not sure if canvas is the best thing here, but let's make another one. I'll add it as a child under the original canvas, and I'll rename it, and I'm going to call this one game menu. So now we have one canvas and we have another one inside the first one. And this one will be smaller, so let's give it a 0.5. No. Oh no, I'm looking here. The height, of course. We don't want it to be as high as the full canvas, so let's start with 100. Yeah, that should probably be enough. And we'll put it at the top right. Wait. Alt, yeah. Alt and then top left. So we set it as a pivot and an anchor at the top left. Guessing, but does it also make it possible to export those controllers from game to game? Yes, you can do that. Of course, it depends, because the game logic will have no... The idea is that the game logic will have no idea about any of the graphics or the input, how that works. So you can easily replace those. The other way around, of course, in general, your controllers will have some knowledge about the game. So it depends. I'm thinking, well, what kind of controllers will we have? I'm thinking a game controller, and a mouse input controller, a graphics controller. Your mouse input controller, for instance, could be very generic. So it could be something like, okay, when the left mouse button is clicked, do this. When the user drags the mouse, do that. When the right mouse button is clicked, do this. So it could be very generic. But I'm thinking it's still gonna be hard to implement controllers that are not aware of the game at hand. On the other hand, it won't be that hard, I'm guessing, to just take one of these controllers, get them into another game and just update them here and there. Because the basis is still gonna be the same. User clicks the left mouse button, right mouse button and drags. But what happens when they do it, then there will be some changes. So it's a bit harder, I'm guessing, but it should be doable with a certain amount of tweaking. Right, we have our game menu, and now in our game menu we are going to create our button. So now we have a button. Let's zoom in a little. Not exactly what we want. The first thing already is that my game menu is too high still. So I'm going to decrease the height to 50. And then my button. Like this. The second canvas is pretty much optional. The button, let's call it, good name for a button, new game button. And then under the button you can see we have a text, and there's a script here, and we can change it directly from the inspector, and we can say, okay, the text should be new game. And there we go, we have a button saying new game. I'm gonna duplicate it, rename load game button. And of course we need to change the text to load game. Now what happens, of course, is that both buttons, they overlap. And one thing you can do is you can use layout managers on your canvas to actually automatically resize and put the buttons in a certain order. So there's a lot of things you can automate where the canvas updates its size based on the buttons inside, or where the buttons change size depending on the room that they have within the canvas. And a typical thing to add in a UI is a vertical or horizontal layout group, where automatically the buttons will be placed horizontally so they don't overlap, because now we have two buttons but they're in the same position. Of course, for something simple like this, we might just as well go ahead and change the position. So currently our X position is 80 for both buttons. So if we move up the load game button, and we'll have to try a bit, 300's too much, 250, 240, yeah, that looks pretty much okay. So there we go. So our button, we already know, is 160 in width. We can see that here. And while we're at it, let's just add a third one, just for the sake of it. Save game button. And the text, obviously, save game. Oh, accidentally hit a keyboard shortcut there. There we go, save game. And of course we need to change the X position. We'll add another 160, and now we've got three nice little buttons here on our canvas. Nothing fancy, but it's a start. Now what we can do here, because how do we make these buttons work? Well, there's something quite simple here in Unity. If you look at the inspector, we have a on click, and if we click here, this is actually the sprite used for the button. This is default Unity sprite for the button, but we can replace it. If you have a good looking sprite for your button, you can put another one and make it look completely different with some shadow, for instance, around the edges. But here we have this method onClick, and here we can add a method, a function that will run when the user clicks the button. Pretty simple, and that can even be multiple functions, so you can have several classes or objects in your game register here to be notified when the button is pressed. Of course, we don't have any scripts yet, so nothing can register for this new game button, and that's the first thing we're gonna do. Let's just as a way of an example, we have our canvas. I'm gonna rename this. I'm gonna call this UI. So we have our UI spanning the whole window, then we have the game menu at the top, and in that game menu we have our three buttons: new game, load game, and save game. Now next to UI, I'm going to create another element. I'm just going to create an empty object, and the empty object, let's rename this controllers, and under controllers we'll create our first controller called a game controller. So this is supposed to be the main controller of the game. And we'll have to add a script to that. So let's start within our project folder. Let's make a folder scripts, subfolder UI. What am I saying? No, not UI. Rename controllers. So here we're going to add a script, and I'm going to be making this in C#. As you can see, you can also use JavaScript. Game controller. And let's set up our mono-develop. Just switch that on the screen. So now we have our new script, and by default when you create a new C# script in Unity, it will automatically make it inherit from mono behavior, and it gets a start and an update function. Start function runs at when the game object is initialized, and the update function will be called every single frame. Now we're not going to use these for the moment. Let's just add a place for functions. Come on. My typing is really bad at the moment. We're just gonna add a empty function called tests new game button. There we go, and save our controller script. And then we can go back to Unity, and then we add the controller script to the game controller. Will it work that way? Yeah. So now the game controller has a game controller script attached to it. And if we go back to our buttons here, the new game button, Not sure why it always switches to services here instead of the inspector. When you remember, I said you could register a function to be notified when the user clicks the button. And that's what we're going to do. It'll select first our object, the game controller, and then we can choose the function, and we cannot. Curious. Let's give that a second thought. Select the right object. Or maybe I should save my scene first. Scenes. All right. Nope. What did I do wrong? Test new game button. Should I make it public? So our game controller script was added to the game controller on runtime. Test new game button. There it is. There we go. So now whenever the user clicks the new game button over here, when the game's running, then the game will automatically launch the function game controller test new game. And so whatever we enter here in test new game button, that code would run every time the user clicks that button. The positive of this is that when we look at always have to switch between both windows, right? So the controller has no knowledge of the buttons. It just has a method for new game, and it's actually the new game button that tells the system that the user has clicked the button, and the game controller just registers for those buttons. We register them in here, and whenever the user clicks the button, the game controller will run, but the game controller has no knowledge of the buttons. It just needs to register once. So that's a good separation of the code. The new game, the UI, will not have any code to run. It's just whenever a user clicks it, the right function will be called to do whatever the button's supposed to do. The work window is square mazy. That's entirely preference. You can resize this. You can even move windows around in Unity. Those are not even all the windows you can have. You can see here there's lots of different windows you can have in Unity. This is just like a simple default setup that works fine. I believe this is the standard, where you have the scene and the game next to each other, and then the hierarchy and the inspector, and then at the bottom the console. So we can launch the game now and hit the new game button, but of course nothing will happen because our game controller script just has an empty function to handle the new game. Right, I think that's enough to show the basic concept of the UI. The thing is, it's hard to start implementing anything before we have thought about the exact structure of our game. What are we trying to achieve? Well, since we are trying to segregate all the game model classes from the visuals and the input, the first thing to tackle, in my opinion, is the game model. Know what kind of objects you will have and how they will interact, and then add the visual layer and the in and output on top of that. The sounds as well, of course. But you need to know first which kind of objects you have and how they will interact before you can start implementing the graphics. The downside of that is that you don't have any feedback if you're making mistakes in your logic, because there is no visual feedback that you've made a mistake somewhere. The other way you might tackle it is to go step by step and like add one element of your game and then immediately make a sprite for it and a button and test things out, how it looks on screen, and make sure that the object behaves the way you want it. I'm not sure if there is a good and a bad approach to it. Both probably have their upsides and downsides, and the best way is probably somewhere in between. But again, I'm not an experienced programmer, so I will probably witness or experience that later on and realize that I should have tackled some things differently, but that's part of the learning curve. Now, on to our game itself. Let's first start with adding a few more controllers. Even though I'm not going to implement any behavior yet. Mouse controller. I might just duplicate this. That's easier. Rename graphics controller. And we'll probably want as well a sound controller. Right? So the game controller, which will be the main function, actually, the main class that launches the game class, creates a new game, loads a game, saves a game, things like that. And a mouse controller, which will give feedback from the mouse, not when the user clicks one of these buttons, of course, because that's already been taken care of by the UI, but when the user clicks somewhere in the middle of the screen on an object to interact with it, then our mouse controller will detect where the user has clicked, what is in the exact position where the user has clicked, and then call the game controller, probably tell them, hey, the user has clicked at coordinates x15, y23. Yes, you can add placeholder graphics sprite, that's absolutely correct, but I'm not just talking about the sprites and the graphics itself, but also the graphics controller. Because there's more than just the sprite and the graphical model. You also have to add the necessary code to actually implement those graphics. What I mean with the segregation of the classes is that if I have a class, a building for instance, that will have some parameters and functions, because it's a building in the game, but it will not have any knowledge of the graphics. So yeah, makes sense. Basic sphere or cube while building the game and then add graphics in later. That's true, but the game you probably learned in the tutorial, it does not have this segregation that I am going for. most likely, if you just start by adding objects in the scene and then give them behavior, it works. I'm not going to say it doesn't work, but you don't have the separation between responsibilities that I'm going for here. And I'm obviously not saying that my method is better, but it's what I want to do, also to make the game somewhat future-proof and to be able to make changes later on without having to redo half the code. Where were we? Oh my. I've only played for, or been busy for half an hour and I already get lost where I am. Oh yeah, the different game elements. So let's add another under scripts. Yep, under scripts we're gonna add a new folder. Game logic, game model. Game model. Right, and under game model we're going to create a series of scripts, C# scripts. What do we have? We have a building. Let's open it up. Hello Blobka, welcome to the stream. Yep, something very different this time. Right, the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to remove mono behavior, because this is my game model, and that means the scripts for the game models, for the different classes in the game model, they will not be mono behavior objects. They will not be objects sitting in the scene, but instead they will be classic classes with just some logic on them. No problem, Spite. Yeah, Twitch often has some serious delays. Even at the start of the stream I had my bot joining, and even 1 minute later I still couldn't see it in the viewer list. Then I typed a command and it worked straight away, so the bot was there, just didn't show up. Okay, building. Let's just make an empty class for now, because we're not gonna implement anything yet, just the logic, or think about the logic at least. I'm juggling windows here. There we go. So we've created a building script, and I'm going to duplicate that. Can I duplicate that? Copy. No. Can I not copy and rename an existing script? Apparently not. Well, that's too bad. Let's add some more. So we have a building, we have a room, or we will have multiple rooms. Then we what else do we have in MatTV? Characters. Characters. Just looking on my cheat sheet. Is that what you call it in English? A cheat sheet? Programs, of course. And then, okay, still need to open all the scripts. C#, a program block. Not sure that's the best description here, because, well, I'm not sure if every one of you has played MatTV to begin with. but if you can have a program, and for instance, it can be a series with 10 episodes. So in your program schedule, you would you would have a program, and one program here, this program script or class will represent a single program, but the program can consist of different episodes. And when you're in the schedule for your channel, you can actually drag programs into your schedule, but that's not the same. You're not dragging an entire program, because you're actually dragging a part of the program, and it's one episode. And so I'm gonna call that program block, which is something different than program, which is just the entire series. In case it can be one program can have just one program block, but yeah, both are not the same. What else do we have? Adverts, and the same here, a advert block, because we can actually have an advert that has to be shown 5 times. And so yeah, an advert block, same as with the programs. Advert blocks, programs, program blocks, of course a schedule, I already forgot. So we have a building with rooms and characters. We have a character, the schedule, the channel, of course, because you will be in charge of, oh, not a folder. That's not what I wanted. A C# script, and what did I just say? Channel. And it should be in the right folder. Whoa, is my Unity hanging? Okay. You can see Unity sorts them alphabetically. So we have a building with rooms and some channels and characters, and each channel will have a schedule with program blocks from a program, with advert blocks from an advert. I think this is already quite a lot. It's definitely not complete. But I will have some classes derive in standard object orientation. For instance, characters. We will have player character. We will have characters who are in charge of the other channels. But we will also have non-player characters, someone who will run the advert agency, for instance. Or just completely neutral characters where you can just talk with. The schedule is part of the channel, so each channel will have a schedule. It's good to open it in 2 tabs and refresh one, compare delay. I'm already juggling with Windows at the moment, Maisie. But of course you're talking to Spite, but it's one thing I hate when you do Twitch streaming. You should definitely have multiple monitors to have some room to juggle around with Windows. Still running with a decent primary monitor and a old second-hand secondary monitor, which is already far from ideal. But okay, we're coping with that. So we have the game model. Did I open all of them? Let's just double click them all. And then we'll move back to MonoDevelop. So there we have Mono Develop. As you can see, the game controller we're gonna close for the moment. So all our classes that we've just created, we're gonna do the same for all of them. We're going to make sure they don't derive from Mono Develop. And I'm not sure if everything's pretty clear for all the viewers. I'm guessing there might be a mixture of experienced programmers, beginners, and people with just an interest in programming. Which means that the stream will be clearer for some of the target groups and less for others. I'm trying to do my best to explain as much as possible everything I'm doing. But if something's not clear, don't hesitate to ask questions, guys. So there we go. We have all our classes. And that's the next thing we will be doing, is to actually implement these classes, make some game logic, give them parameters and functions. And then after that, we will go back to Unity, or let's just save them all for now. There we go. So then we will go back to Unity and we will start implementing our controllers to get input from the user and to have a graphical representation of our classes. One thing we might do is make a simple graphic implementation just to get feedback if everything's working correctly. And then afterwards we can easily replace the graphic by something much more sophisticated. I think that's a good idea to do it that way. Still thinking out loud here, because it's not something that I prepared very thoroughly and I didn't have a complete planning yet. Just thinking through the options. One thing I could do, for instance, is make like a simple text window in here that gives some feedback about the game state. And then I could just implement these classes, like create a game with a building, and the text window would say new building created. You know, some feedback so you know that everything works correctly. Codex of Victory, Blobka. Was that the XCOM-like game with the geoscape and the base building and turn-based combat? Thank you, Spite. I'm doing my best, but be aware that I'm not as experienced, so I might be doing things that are not as smart. So we'll see in a few weeks when we've got something more concrete, whether that was a good idea or not. Because I'm also doing this for myself. Low budget, yeah, okay. Yeah, that was an interesting game, Codex of Victory. Well, it looked interesting. There are quite a few Unity games around. Some of you may be familiar as well with Tank Zone Battle that we've played on the stream. And Tank Zone Battle is also a Unity game. Quite a few decent games actually developed in Unity. There's a lot of possibilities. And it's not that hard to make something. Depends, of course, on the size and complexity of your game. If you want to make something really simple, then you can do that very fast in Unity. The thing that I'm making may be visually relatively simple, but in terms of game concept, it's probably harder than it looks like at first. Already here, if you see advert and advert blocks, programs and program blocks, what happens? Can you have two of the same program? That's already something to think about when you build the game concept. So if I have rented a movie to be broadcasted, can that same movie still show up at the agency? Can another channel pick up the same movie? I think in the original Mad TV they could. I'm not entirely sure, but I think they could. Same with adverts. It's not because I have a certain advert that an other channel might not have the same advert. Yeah. So already what is unique, what is not unique. Program blocks can also have different sizes in Mad TV. You can have a block one size or two or three even. So they take up 2 or 3 slots in the schedule. There you have it. I'm already very much in doubt how to start with the game model. I'm thinking the first thing to start with is just a building, because there's only one building in the game. But there's already a question, do we actually need a building class then if there's only one building? We need a graphical implementation, but is there any parameters or behavior for the building as a whole? Not even sure. Not advancing here at the moment, am I? Let's just save the project for now. Didn't I save all the... Yes, I did. And here it's still showing the old methods. Yeah, it's still showing mono behavior here, while in when we go here you can see I've saved this without mono behavior, and when I'm in Unity and I click on the scripts, they still show the mono behavior and the start and update methods. From a database point of view, I would make your time schedule the equivalent of a primary key. Time schedule. And I'm thinking the game is real time. Time advances, although of course the time in game, 1 day in game is maybe 10 minutes in real time. But it is real time. You cannot speed it up or slow it down. Or maybe you can. You cannot pause the game. Or maybe you can. Again, I'm doubting. Hi, Commander Zonk. Well, you missed the start, so it's not very difficult so far what I did. But we haven't done much either. We just have 3 buttons: new game, load game, save game, and they don't do anything. That's after 1 hour of programming. Well, we're mostly doing the thinking right now. So the schedule is just like, okay, at that day, at that time, my channel will broadcast this program. So schedule will be linked to program blocks and advert blocks and to a channel. Each channel will have a schedule. Ubisoft want to hire. Okay, I still have a future in programming then. Can we add some more buttons, please? Right, going back to MonoDevelop here. By the way, MonoDevelop, the C# editor I'm using here, is actually coming together with Unity. You can choose a different, what's it called again? You know, these programs used for editing code. I don't even know the name anymore. But MonoDevelop is coming together with Unity, and it's pretty good. You can see already the colors and the way that the game indents certain lines. Didn't realize it was runtime. I was thinking the hour long or say 15-minute incremented. Real time, yeah. 50-minute increments. No, the original MadTV is real time, but well, it moves faster than real time, so it's actually speeded up. I'm thinking like, oh, yeah, every few seconds 1 minute will pass in game time, something like that. But I'm not sure. I'm wondering again if you could pause the game, or even, I'm pretty sure you could speed it up. I think you could fast forward. And the game pauses when you enter your computer, for instance. Give each program or episode a showing number. Yeah. But I think we can handle that with program block. Because program block, what is program block? This is actually one of the blocks that you drag and drop into your schedule. So if the program that you have knows which episodes have already been broadcasted. Let's start with a simple example, a series with 10 episodes. You've already broadcasted 3. So the next one would be number 4. So if you drag the program to the schedule, you would be dragging actually a program block, and the block would know that episode 1 to 3 has already been broadcasted, so it would automatically be episode 4, and that would then go into your schedule. But what happens if you pick another program block from the same program and drop it before the one that you've just placed? Then the original one should update, because the new one would then become episode 4, and the one already in your schedule would move to episode 5. Right? But we can do that. As soon as you drop a program block into the schedule, it can check the schedule for any previously programmed program blocks for the same program. Man, this is getting complicated already. Just the simple concept of adding programs to the schedule. Can we not just start again, guys, and we'll do a 2D platformer? Twisted Mario. Or a first-person shooter. That should be relatively easy. Well, from a game logic perspective at least. Graphics, on the other hand. And sounds. Yeah, I think I'm gonna stick for now with what I just said. So we have a program block that fits into the schedule. Every time you drop a program block into the schedule will check if it has other instances of the same program and update them all. And the same with adverts. And I think that's the way it works in the original Mad TV. If you have like an advert that you have to show 5 times. So you've already shown it 3 times, for instance. And you drop the advert for your next 2 program blocks. That would say advert A 4 of 5, and the next one would say advert A 5 of 5. But if your first program runs and you do not meet the conditions for the advert, then the advert will stay at 3 of 5. So the next ad would no longer be 5 out of 5, but it would become 4 out of 5. So every hour as well, the schedule would need to verify all the program blocks and advert blocks and see if they actually need to be updated based on what was already broadcasted before. I think we already have something. Let's just, for the sake of not losing all our discussion here, I realized I was looking at another window than you guys. I was looking at the Unity and you were looking at MonoDevelop. But anyway, I haven't done anything, so it doesn't matter. Let's just add some text here saying schedule should refresh info about program blocks and advert blocks every hour, because a program block lasts 1 hour, and every time user drags a program block or advert block into the schedule. Well, actually, when they remove it as well, so every time a user makes a change to the schedule. That's more generic. So the schedule should refresh info about program blocks and advert blocks every hour and every time a user makes a change to the schedule. I think that makes sense. Program can be a movie, a series, etc. A program can consist of different elements. Come on. Oh no? Oh, I thought it was a capital L. Guess it's not. A program can consist of different elements called program blocks. This is a capital B, is it? Yeah. Yeah, I'm already not consistent in my naming because it probably should be capitalized. And a program block. Oh. Individual elements of a program fits into one slot in the schedule. Okay, we'll refine that later, and the same goes for adverts, I guess. So oh, no, wrong button. Undo. An advert is a contract to broadcast a number of times within a certain time limit and with certain conditions, e.g. minimum viewers. And an advert can consist of different elements called advert blocks. And then advert blocks, we'll copy from program blocks. Advert blocks, individual elements of an advert fits into one slot in the schedule. That's all correct. And save. Alright, that's already a bit of logic written out in text there. Building. There is only one building in the game which contains the channels and various rooms and characters, both which can be neutral or linked to a channel. Various witch. She's a witch because she weighs as much as a duck. There's only one building in the game which contains the channels and various rooms and characters, both of which can be neutral or linked to a channel. Does that sentence make sense to everyone? Because please do tell me if I am talking gibberish. Building a room. A room is a part of the building with a specific function. Rooms can be neutral or belong to one of the channels. A building with rooms. Then we have the schedule. Come on. Schedule. Building with rooms. A schedule with programs, blocks from a program, and with advert blocks from an advert. And the building has rooms but also characters. But come on, what's happening here? Why does it do this? Characters, rooms, and channels. And again it does it. Why? Okay, so a building with channels, characters, and rooms. Channel last. Yeah. Channel has different schedules. No, the channel has a schedule. Can have different rooms and characters linked to that. A schedule can have program blocks and advert blocks. Yes, the Holy Grail. I haven't found the Holy Grail yet here, I believe. But we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. Right. I think I have a few things to think about before I continue. So I'm probably gonna wrap it up really quickly here and come back later. Because it might... Well, I think I'm on the right track. But I'd like to think it through a little more before I continue, because I don't want to end up in a situation where I did some things completely wrong and wasted all of you guys' time. I think we got a basic idea here about the concept. Let's just reiterate. So we have our scene with a main camera. We have some user interface elements such as these buttons over here. We have the event system, of course. We also have controllers for the game, the mouse, the graphics, and the sound. And then we have some scripts here for our data model. Those scripts will be unaware of any of the visual or platform implementations. They will just work together to make the game behave the way it should behave, without knowing how the game is presented to the user or how the user interacts with the game. And then we already have a few classes that we will have in our game, with the building, the channel, the characters, rooms, programs, and adverts. I think it's a good start. And with that, guys, I'm going to wrap it up for now. Thank you all for watching, and I'll might make this into a weekly stream, maybe every week during the weekend. Short stream on programming. That gives me a week every time to think about it, and that keeps it light as well, because I don't think anyone's interested in watching 3 or 4 hours of programming. Thank you very much, guys, and see you around.